9.2. The Attention Getter, the first step of an introduction. As you know by now, a good introduction will capture an audience's attention, while a bad introduction can turn an audience against a speaker. An attention getter is the device a speaker uses at the beginning of a speech to capture an audience's interest and make them interested in the speech's topic. Typically, there are 4 things to consider in choosing a specific attention-getting device: appropriateness, or relevance to the audience, purpose of speech, topic, and occasion. First, when selecting an attention-getting device, you want to make sure that the option you choose is actually appropriate and relevant to your specific audience. Different audiences will have different backgrounds and knowledge, so you should use your audience analysis to determine whether specific information you plan on using would be appropriate for a specific audience. For example, if you're giving a speech on family units to a group of individuals over the age of 65, starting your speech with a reference to the television show Gossip Girl may not be the best idea, because the television show may not be relevant to that audience. Second, you need to consider the basic purpose of your speech. As discussed earlier in this text, there are 3 basic purposes you can have for giving a speech: to inform, to persuade, and to entertain. When selecting an attention getter, you want to make sure that you select one that corresponds with your basic purpose. If your goal is to entertain an audience, then starting a speech with a quotation about how many people are dying in Africa each day from malnutrition may not be the best way to get your audience's attention. Remember, one of the basic goals of an introduction is to prepare your audience for your speech. If your attention getter differs drastically in tone from the rest of your speech, such as dying in Africa when you want your audience to laugh, the disjointedness may cause your audience to become confused, or just tune you out completely. Your third basic consideration when picking an attention-getting device is your speech topic. Ideally, your attention-getting device should have a relevant connection to your speech. The last consideration when picking an attention-getting device involves the speech occasion. Different occasions will necessitate different tones or particular styles or manners of speaking. For example, a persuasive speech about death and dying shouldn't be happy and hilarious. An informative speech on the benefits of laughing shouldn't be dull, dreary, and depressing. When selecting an attention getter, you want to make sure that the attention getter sets the tone for the speech. Now that we've explored the 4 major considerations you must think of when selecting an attention getter, let's look at a range of different attention getters you may employ. Miller discovered that speakers tend to use one of 11 attention-getting devices when starting a speech. The rest of this section is going to examine these 11 attention-getting devices. Reference to subject. The first attention-getting method is to tell your audience the subject of your speech. This device is probably the most direct, but it may also be the least interesting of the possible attention getters. Here's an example. We are surrounded by statistical information in today's world, so understanding statistics is becoming paramount to citizenship in the 21st century. Now, this sentence explicitly tells an audience that the speech they are about to hear is about the importance and understanding of statistics. While this isn't the most entertaining or interesting attention getter, it is very clear and direct. Reference to audience. The second attention-getting device to consider is a direct reference to the audience. In this case, the speaker has a clear understanding of the audience and points out that there is something unique about the audience that should make them interested in the speech's content. Here's an example. As human resource professionals, you and I know the importance of talent management. In today's competitive world, we need to invest in getting and keeping the best talent for our organizations to succeed. In this example, the speaker reminds the audience of their shared status as human resource professionals and uses the common ground to acknowledge the importance of talent management in human resources. Quotation. Another way to capture your listener's attention is to use the words of another person that relate directly to your topic. Maybe you found a really great quotation in one of the articles or books you read while researching your speech. If not, you can also use a number of resources that compile useful quotations from noted individuals. Probably the most famous quotation book of all time is Bartlett's Familiar Quotations. It's now in its 17th edition. Some other websites that contain useful databases of quotations are linked in your textbook. Quotations are a great way to start a speech, so let's look at an example that could be used for a speech on deception. Oliver Goldsmith, a 16th century writer, poet, and physician, once noted that, quote, "The true use of speech is not so much to express our wants as to conceal them," end quote. Reference to current events. Referring to a current news event that relates to your topic is often an effective way to capture attention, as it immediately makes the audience aware of how relevant the topic is in today's world. For example, consider this attention getter for a persuasive speech on frivolous lawsuits. On January 10, 2007, Scott Anthony Gomez Jr. and a fellow inmate escaped from a Pueblo, Colorado jail. During their escape, the duo attempted to rappel from the roof of the jail using a makeshift ladder of bedsheets. During Gomez's attempt to scale the building, he slipped, fell 40 feet, and injured his back. After being quickly apprehended, Gomez filed a lawsuit against the jail for making it too easy for him to escape. In this case, the speaker is highlighting a news event that illustrates what a frivolous lawsuit is, setting up the speech topic of a need for change in how such lawsuits are handled. Historical reference. You may also capture your listener's attention by referring to a historical event related to your topic. Obviously, this strategy is closely related to the previous one, except that instead of a recent news event, you're reaching further back in history to find a relevant reference. For example, if you're giving a speech on the Iraq War that began in 2003, you could refer back to the Vietnam War as a way of making a comparison. During the 1960s and 70s, the United States intervened in the civil strife between North and South Vietnam. The result was a long-running war of attrition in which many American lives were lost, and the country of Vietnam suffered tremendous damage and destruction. Today, we see a similar war being waged in Iraq. American lives are being lost, and stability has not yet returned to the region. In this example, the speaker is evoking the audience's memories of the Vietnam War to raise awareness of similarities to the war in Iraq. Anecdote. Another device you can use to start a speech is to tell an anecdote related to the speech's topic. An anecdote is a brief account or story of an interesting or humorous event. Notice the emphasis here is on the word brief. A common mistake speakers make when telling anecdotes is to make the anecdote too long. Remember, your entire introduction should be only 10 to 15% of your speech, so your attention getter must be very short. One type of anecdote is a real story that emphasizes a speech's basic message. For example, here is an anecdote a speaker could use to begin a speech on how disconnected people are from the real world because of technology. In July 2009, a high school girl named Alexa Longuera was walking along a main boulevard near her home on Staten Island, New York, typing a message on her cell phone. Not paying attention to the world around her, she took a step and fell right into an open manhole. A second type of anecdote is a parable or fable. A parable or fable is an allegorical anecdote designed to teach general life lessons. The most widely known parables for most Americans are those given in the Bible, and the best-known fables are Aesop's fables. For the same speech on how disconnected people are with the real world because of technology, the speaker could have used the fable of the boy and the filberts. The ancient Greek writer Aesop told a fable about a boy who put his hand into a pitcher of filberts. The boy grabbed as many of the delicious nuts as he possibly could, but when he tried to pull them out, his hand wouldn't fit through the neck of the pitcher because he was grasping so many filberts. Instead of dropping some of them so that his hand would fit, he burst into tears and cried about his predicament. The moral of the story: don't try to do too much at once. After recounting the anecdote, the speaker could easily relate the fable to the notion that technology in our society leads us to try and do too many things at once. While parables and fables are short and entertaining, their application to your speech topic should be clear. We'll talk about this idea in more detail later in this chapter when we discuss how to link your attention getter explicitly to your topic. Startling statement. The eighth device you can use to start a speech is to surprise your audience with startling information about your topic. Often, startling statements come in the form of statistics and strange facts. The goal of a good startling statistic is that it surprises the audience and gets them engaged in your topic. For example, if you're giving a speech about oil conservation, you could start by saying a Boeing 747 airliner holds 57,285 gallons of fuel. You could start a speech on the psychology of dreams by noting the average person has over 1,460 dreams a year. A strange fact, on the other hand, is a statement that does not involve numbers, but is equally surprising to most audiences. For example, you could start a speech on the gambling industry by saying, there are no clocks in any casino in Las Vegas. You could start a speech on the Harlem Globetrotters by saying, in 2000, Pope John Paul II became the most famous honorary member of the Harlem Globetrotters. All four of these examples come from a great website for strange facts that you can see linked in your textbook. Although startling statements are fun, it's important to use them ethically. First, make sure that your startling statement is factual. The internet is full of startling statements and claims that are simply not factual. So when you find a statement you would like to use, you have an ethical duty to ascertain its truth before you use it. Second, make sure that your startling statement is relevant to your speech and not just thrown in for shock value. We've all heard startling statements made in the media that are clearly made for purposes of shock or fear-mongering. As speakers, we have an ethical obligation to avoid playing on people's emotions in this way. Question. Another strategy for getting your audience's attention is to ask them a question. There are two types of questions commonly used as attention getters: response questions and rhetorical questions. A response question is a question that the audience is expected to answer in some manner. For example, you could ask your audience, please raise your hand if you have ever thought about backpacking in Europe. Or, have you ever voted for the Electoral College? If so, stand up. In both of these cases, the speaker wants his or her audience to respond. A rhetorical question, on the other hand, is a question to which no actual reply is expected. Humor. Humor is another effective method for gaining an audience's attention. Humor is an amazing tool when used properly. We cannot begin to explain all the amazing facets of humor within this text, but we can say that humor is a great way of focusing an audience on what you are saying. However, humor is a double-edged sword. If you do not wield the sword carefully, you can turn your audience against you very quickly. When using humor, you really need to know your audience and understand what they will find humorous. One of the biggest mistakes a speaker can make is to use some form of humor that the audience either doesn't find funny or that they find offensive. Think about how incompetent the character of Michael Scott seems on the television program The Office, in large part because of his ineffective use of humor. We always recommend that you test out humor of any kind on a sample of potential audience members prior to actually using it during a speech. Now that we've warned you about the perils of using humor, let's talk about how to use humor as an attention getter. Humor can be incorporated into several of the attention-getting devices mentioned. You could use a humorous anecdote, quotation, or current event. As with other attention-getting devices, you need to make sure that your humor is relevant to your topic, as one of the biggest mistakes some novices make when using humor is to add humor that really doesn't support the overall goal of the speech. So when looking for humorous attention getters, you want to make sure that the humor is non-offensive to your audience and relevant to your speech. For example, here's a humorous quotation from Nicolas Chamfort, a French author during the 16th century. Quote, "The only thing that stops God from sending another flood is that the first one was useless." End quote. While this quotation could be great for some audiences, other audiences may find this humorous quotation offensive. For example, religious audiences. The Chamfort quotation could be great for a speech on the ills of modern society, but probably not for a speech on the state of modern religious conflict. You want to make sure that the leap from your attention getter to your topic isn't too complicated for your audience, or the attention getter will backfire. Personal reference. The 10th device you may consider to start a speech is to refer to a story about yourself that is relevant for your topic. Some of the best speeches are ones that come from personal knowledge and experience. If you are an expert or have first-hand knowledge related to your topic, sharing this information with the audience is a great way to show that you are credible during your attention getter. For example, if you had a gastric bypass surgery and you wanted to give an informative speech about the procedure, you could introduce your speech in this way. In the fall of 2008, I decided that it was time that I took my life into my own hands. After suffering for years with the disease of obesity, I decided to take a leap of faith and get a gastric bypass in an attempt to finally beat the disease. If you use a personal example, don't get carried away with the focus on yourself and your own life. Your speech topic is the purpose of the attention getter, not the other way around. Another pitfall in using a personal example is that it may be too personable for you to maintain your composure. It may be too personal for you to maintain your composure. For example, a student once started a speech about her grandmother by saying, "My grandmother died of cancer at 3:30 this morning." The student then proceeded to cry nonstop for 10 minutes. While this is an extreme example, we strongly recommend that you avoid any material that could get you overly choked up while speaking. When speakers have an emotional breakdown during their speech, audience members stop listening to the message and become very uncomfortable. Reference to occasion. The last device we mention for starting a speech is to refer directly to the speaking occasion. This attention getter is only useful if the speech is being delivered for a specific occasion. Many toasts, for example, start with the following statement: "Today we are here to honor X." In this case, X could be a retirement, a marriage, a graduation, or any number of other special occasions. Because of its specific nature, this attention getter is the least likely to be used for speeches being delivered for college courses. Key takeaways. In developing the introduction to your speech, begin by deciding upon a statement to capture the audience's attention. Attention getters can include references to the audience, quotations, references to current events, historical references, anecdotes, startling comments, questions, humor, personal references, and references to the occasion.